the right spot here. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. But Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will that go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated in much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. And the people saw the sign Jesus performed. They began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water. And they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Grace, peace, and mercy from God our Father and our risen Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Anybody do any shopping for like Christmas in July sales? No? Okay. Anybody do any shopping on Amazon Prime Day? Oh, come on! You're holding out on me. I admit I didn't. That is their version of Christmas in July, which was created for, let me think, drumming up business in a slow season. Because Christmas, people come out. They do Christmas in July out of Put-in-Bay, just a little across the lake from where I live. They had 35,000 people on that little island. My reaction was, yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there. But it got me thinking about Christmas, and I'm thinking about a Christmas present. One of the stranger Christmas presents that I got from our youngest daughter. She gifted her parents with a kind of a unique Christmas present. More work. Because even at 27 years old, what do you expect from kids? They want more work out of you, But actually, it's for a good reason. She got us a subscription to it's called Storyworth. And every week, we each get a question, a prompt question. And some of them are pretty probing, often reflecting on what's happened in our lives. And we have to respond to that question. And at the end of the year, after all of these weeks of stories are put together in a book. And everybody gets a book. And when you think about it, this was kind of a smart move on Megan's part. Because unlike the good old days when Grandma lived next door, and Grandpa showed up on a regular basis, and you could hear the stories. Our grandchildren live between 4 hours by car and 5 hours by plane away. They don't get stories, they get FaceTime. Or whatever. We use FaceTime. Lower bandwidth. So Megan's thinking, this is a way to get those stories. And stories are so important to our lives. We're people of stories. And that is particularly true in our faith story. Because the Bible, we think of the Bible, that there's the book, there's the Bible. Or now we think of the book, there's my phone, there's my Bible. It's a library of stories gathered together to refer to remember, and to build on, and to grow into. And this particular story that I just read was right in the middle of our gospel from last week, when we were still in Mark. And it got skipped all over because we wanted to make it a little different. Because this story is so important that it shows up in all 4 gospels. It's a little bit different depending on the writer's focus. And John is a man who wants us to see the signs. When something amazing happens in John's story of Jesus' life, he calls it a sign to point the reader towards Jesus. And this story is a sign. When you think about this, can you imagine Jesus and the disciples are sitting there, 5,000 people coming towards them. It's got to be a dust storm from all those feet. It would be probably their equivalent of 35,000 people on the island. And Jesus very calmly turns to Philip and says, where shall we buy food to feed these folks? And Philip, being a practical kind of guy, said, what are you thinking? It would take 8 months of wages to give them each a bite. Duh. Andrew, a slightly more positive approach, has noticed that there's this boy here with some food. Now, he's probably not the only one who's been kind of casing the crowd, saying, do you have a little something to share here? And this boy has a little bit to share. Like I told the kids, that's to me the best part of the story is there is this child sharing. That's not how we are wired. And he says, well, here's what I have. See what you can do with it. Okay? And Jesus takes it, blesses it, gives thanks, and starts to distribute it. And you gotta wonder, how was this miracle accomplished? Was it just the hand of God? Or was it the hand of God guiding human hearts and hands? Was this perhaps the Galilean version of stone soup? Okay, quiz time. Stone soup. Anybody not remember the story of stone soup? Because I barely remember it. But I'm going to try to walk you through it real fast just to remind you. Because this boy in the gospel makes me think of this. There is a young boy walking down the road. And he's been walking for a long time. He's tired, he's hungry, he needs a place to stay, he needs food. And he sees a house. And he stops. And before he goes up to the door, he spots a stone. Not a real big stone, but, you know, a nice smooth stone. And he puts it in his pocket. He goes up to the door, knocks on the door, and an older lady, I hate to say an old woman, because there is no such thing, there are older ladies, opens the door, and in I hate to say it, but typical human response is, what do you want? Little leery, little, older woman by herself. There's this little kid who might be, like 11 or 12, I don't know. But he's smart. He said, well, I'm really hungry. Could you give me something to eat? I don't have anything. Well, could you give me a pot of water? Why? He pulls out a stone, so I can make stone soup. What? Stone soup? Yeah, I just need a pot of water that I need to be able to boil some water. She's going, all right, this I gotta see. Brings him in, puts a pot of water on the stove, turns up the heat. He puts his stone in, gives it a little time, tastes the broth. That's a nice word for it. Tastes the water, to be honest. Says, it's not bad. Really would help to have a little salt and pepper. Well, I have salt and pepper. She adds some salt and some pepper. He gives a little more time. Tastes it again. Oh, that helped. That really helped. Thank you. You know what would really, really make this better? Just a couple carrots and a potato. I have some carrots and I probably have a potato. Pretty soon they're in the pot. Gives it some time. Tastes again. Oh, that really made it. Now we have soup. Says, you know what would really just finish this off? If we just had a couple of boiling bones. I do have a couple. They go into the pot. Finally tastes it. Says, oh, this is the best stone soup I've ever made. She tastes it and realizes that it's pretty darn good soup. Sets the table, invites him to sit down, and they eat their soup together. And she just happened to have some bread. And at this point, they've kind of gotten a relationship. And she says, you need a place to sleep, don't you? Yeah, I do. Well, you can stay here. You can sleep out in the living room. Thank you. The next morning, he wakes up. She's cooking breakfast. And as she watches him go out the door and down the road with leftovers from breakfast in his pocket, she's thinking, ha! Who ever heard of stone soup? It was pretty darn good. I wonder, and I'm not the only one who has wondered this, because I don't have original ideas like that. Well, often. I wonder if Jesus set that in motion, and when people started seeing, they start going, well, I do have a little something in this bag. I have a little something over here in my cloak. Maybe the hand of God opens the hearts and then the hands of that crowd. Maybe that sign wasn't just a divine miracle, but the miracle of the divine working on the human. And there will be those who say, well, then it's not a miracle. Jesus didn't do it all by himself. Well, he didn't do it all by himself in the first place. A little boy said, here's what I have. It's the hand of God working with the hand of mankind, working through open human hearts. And this is why that little doubt there is why we have the second story. Don't you wonder why John has us seeing Jesus going up by himself, the disciples waiting around until dark and saying, well, guess he's not coming, and getting in a boat and starting to head across the lake Why would John have us see that? Because it's what we do all the time. We say, well, I don't see any God in this. I'm going to do what I need to do because by golly, I can take care of it myself. And we get in that boat and say, I'm going there because that's where we're going to go, right? So I'm going. And of course, they run into headwinds. Because that's what happens to us in life in general, but particularly when we're living for ourselves and pursuing our goals without the hand of God working with us. The headwinds just get bigger. They just get overwhelming. But you notice John, unlike some of the other crossing stories, John doesn't have them all worried about the wind. They're just rowing against the wind 3 or 4 miles, bucking that headwind by themselves. And Jesus shows up. And of course, at first they don't recognize who this is walking across the water. Obviously, it can't be good. Must be some evil spirit or something. That's when they get worried. Until Jesus says, Ego eimi, I am. Drawing us back to God's words to Moses. I am who I am. This is Yahweh walking across the water. This is God coming into their headwinds. And when they recognize that and they realize who it is, they want to take him into the boat. And I love this next part. John has us picturing, if you will, that boat going into hyperdrive out of Star Trek. Because immediately they're at their destination. John wants us to see that sign that when we bring God into our boat, when we're bucking our headwinds, we're where we belong. Whenever we are with God and recognizing that God is with us, we're where we're supposed to be, wherever that is. That's the sign John wants us to finish this week with, while we look at all the headwinds. He says, remember to get God into the boat, and you'll be where you're supposed to be. Amen.
Amen.